Hey guys, welcome to another Lunch and Learn from Konabos. Today we'll be talking about how to leverage podcasting for your business. Matt McQueenie is going to tell us how to use podcasting. So, all yours, Matt.
Thanks, Akshay. My podcast co-host for the Konaverse, which is a podcast we actually launched here in Konabos to tell stories internal and outside Konaverse world. So it feels very natural talking to you this way. As Akshay said, my name is Matt McQueenie. I work in digital and PMO here at Konabos. I co-host the aforementioned Konaverse podcast and have been working personally and professionally in podcasting for nearly 8 years now, which in this medium is quite a long time, I guess you'd say. I love the medium as both a consumer and a producer, and see so much growth potential and enthusiasm for podcasting still to come, especially for business. And we're going to help show you how you might be able to leverage it for your business. So in this Lunch and Learn, we're going to talk through the basics of what a podcast is. We're going to talk about the growth of the industry, its natural advantages against written and video content. We'll try to make the business case for podcasting, and then we'll finish up with a little practical walkthrough of how a podcast can get into your own workflow, if you get the double joke there. So what is a podcast? It can come in many forms: short form, long form, scripted, conversational, and it can be delivered in many ways. But at its core, it's almost an equal mix of radio and internet technology. It's kind of like the way that streaming television comes OTT, as they say, or over the top and direct to you on your television. A podcast is almost, in some ways, the over the top version of radio delivered to you right through the internet. So again, podcasts, if we want to get into the technical, because we do have some technical audience here, right? Podcasts are MP3 files that can be downloaded or streamed over the internet. The word MP3 always makes me think of music files that you would download or maybe pirate back in the day to your iPod all those years ago. Interestingly, podcasts started out as much the same. Back in 2004, the first podcast was released. Apple came to prominence in this space as the big entity who created the original directory for podcasts. But consumers, just like the music files, you'd have to sync the files on your computer, then move them via cable to your iPad, and then iPod, and then listen to them. And not the greatest user experience. I know people felt special doing that in the time. Gotten a lot easier these days. Podcasts, shows, and episodes can be consumed now via RSS, really simple syndication. That stands for on computers, mobile devices, smart speakers. I don't want to say the A word because it'll set off the one here in my home office. But also increasingly in vehicle. So many of these vehicles now have wired dashboards, or Apple CarPlay or Google Play. I know, Teslas have become very popular. They have a nice internet connected dashboard there. And especially with Spotify integrations, podcasts are very simple to get to. They're very easily accessible and discoverable through services and applications from the likes of the aforementioned Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and more. Interestingly, talking about these tech behemoths, when Apple originally came out with its directory back in 2005, it immediately ended the hopes of a major podcast upstart at the time called Odeo, O-D-E-O. When that company's fortunes died that day, they had a one-night hackathon. One programmer there named Jack Dorsey created the idea of a 140-character status updating website, which became Twitter. And he now heads Twitter to this very day. Since that point, podcasting has continued to grow regularly right up until today. This chart shows the percentage of the total U.S. population, 12 years and older, who have listened to a podcast in the last month. In 2021, it is 41%, or an estimated 116 million people in America. This report is from Edison Research. They come out with a great annual report outlining trends in the things we listen to each year. There was also another chart in this yearly presentation where I think it said somewhere near 80% of, again, I think they're really only looking at Americans, not the world, but nearly 80% of Americans are familiar with the term podcasting. So there is a gap there, even as things continue to grow, where this medium should become much more, even more commonplace than it is now. Let's talk about some of the advantages of podcasts and podcasting. In terms of what I will call attention share, podcasts can be consumed for more of the day than video or reading. Video and reading especially need a greater level of attention and planning to take part in their consumption. Podcasts can be on from the time your morning alarm, it can be your morning alarm, to when you get ready in the morning. Not to give too much information, but sometimes I have it on there in the shower. It's there when you're commuting, when we get back to that, right? And really everything in between. I saw a stat where most podcast listening happens between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. because it's kind of a passive activity that, if you're working, someone seeing you watch something is maybe going to say, hey, how are you going to really be able to do your work and be watching something? Reading something, you can't sit and read a book and then work. Podcasting is amazing because so much of the share of the day, it can be a part of the activity because it can be a passive, it can be an active activity, but it really can be on in the background. Some podcasts are actually targeted at helping you go to sleep. So, creating a boring podcast is a market opportunity. Myself, I tend to pop a single AirPod into my ear during the day and listen to podcasts as if it's an audio control room feeding my brain. Again, podcasts are on demand and can be listened to at your own pace. You can pause your episode, pick it up right along where you left off. You can also control your speed. There is a not insignificant amount of listeners out there who consume podcasts at faster speeds. We're used to the normal ones like 1.2, 1.5, maybe even 2 times speed. There are some apps out there that will push that to 10 times speed. There are people who are all about consuming the content and want to get through it like it's a race. Podcasts are ubiquitous, meaning they're available everywhere. I primarily listen on my phone on an app called Overcast, but I can listen in my car, again, right through the modern dashboard, and on my smart speakers in my house. Let's not say the A word again, right? But just by speaking it, you can be listening to podcasts, and often they can pick up right where you left off across different devices. Lastly, podcasts are mobile. No longer is it the days when we had to listen on a computer or transfer MP3s to an iPad or iPod. I keep wanting to say iPad. Podcasts are accessible right now for you in a plethora of ways. They can accompany you on your run as you work, and they have really brought chores back to some level of popularity. Oh, I can listen to my podcast? Sure, I'll do the dishes. Let's talk about why podcasts are great for your business. First off, it's the magical chalice of content. We're always looking for content to share and promote our professional messages. Not only is the source audio of the episode great content, but the possibilities that come from that audio for written, visual, and video content are numerous, and we'll get into that a little later. Networking. Podcasts can be phenomenal for this through guest outreach and participation with your partners. Podcasts give you a reason to reach out to your network targets, and those targets will mostly feel really good that you want them on your show. Once you release the episode, the co-marketing between your company and your target and their company, their networks, it can become powerful and magical. And it's really a great opportunity to almost record a meeting you might have, a discussion, catch up, and then, you get great statistics and great feedback and promotion out of it. Team building. Very similarly, what better way to tell your stories than having your employees tell theirs? Potential recruits can hear your mission and who they would be working with in long-form conversation. We have had several instances here where people on our team will start a conversation with another team member based on what they heard on a podcast episode. Akshay, who started this, and I have heard some amazing things we never knew. One member owned a restaurant. Another member was running major construction project management as a teenager. I mean, it's really interesting the way it can open up, make the team come together, especially in these times of COVID-19 and the pandemic. And if you're in a remote, global company, I mean, yes, you're touching base constantly through video and chat and all that, but to actually hear a long form conversation, it brings you closer. Lastly, the technology to create great sounding podcasts has never been easier. This year of COVID-19 has made us all experts on video conferencing software, such as Zoom. These products can be great conversation facilitation platforms. It's also made it a lot easier for guests to agree to come on. They are only a quick Zoom away. In these Zoom, something like Zoom can render you video of the conversation, and it can render you files that you can then use as the basis for the MP3 to post the episode. And it comes out really well. Let's walk through the podcast process and make some recommendations for how to leverage it for your business. So, of course, first off, after you are able to get your guests to agree, get the time in place, and get that Zoom invite sent out, we've really been using Zoom a lot. You can use others, but Zoom is just very, very easy these days. So first off, we're going to record it. We've been using Zoom because everyone is comfortable again, and because it renders the audio file for you when you record. You can use the video element for visual conversation cues as well, which is important. You're looking at your guests. Yes, it's not, at a table together, but you can kind of see the cues of who's ready to talk, when people are ending. It's a little more natural. If you add an affordable USB microphone or headset into the mix, the sound can be so good, you'd think it was recorded in a regular studio. Post-production. This is the part that probably scares some folks, but it's not that scary. It's actually pretty seamless and easy, especially when you have a good file. The input makes the output. So if you have a good file, which you can get from something like Zoom, what's going to come out is going to be pretty good on its own. But if you can put some post-production against it, it's going to be that much better. So, you could use a product such as Adobe Audition. That's actually my favorite. It is a paid product. Pro Tools is another one. There's a free product called Audacity. It takes a little bit more work to get what you need out of it, but that's maybe why it's free. Some of the ones you pay for make it real seamless. If you want to have literally on Adobe Audition, if you want to have a radio announcer voice, you press a setting and it'll put like 3 or 4 equalizers on it, and boom, pretty good. And then you really use something like this to then render the file out so that it is distribution ready to load to a service. So number 3, podcast upload. So you will now want to upload your podcast. Sure, you can upload it to your website or use a Dropbox. But you won't get analytics or tools for distributing to the various podcast directories like we spoke of. It's like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all these places, and there are so many. I mean, feels like a new directory comes out all the time in this booming industry. There's a big one that I saw come on. I think it's GAANA, Ghana, possibly, and that's the Indian podcast directory. And we've seen a lot of action on that one, actually. There are services expressly for this purpose of uploading a podcast, distributing, making it a seamless process. Buzzsprout is one. Spreaker is another. Blueberry, spelled funny, is another. One I really like is called Libsyn. It's been around as long as podcasting itself, actually, I think 2004. It has easy tools for managing the title, description, cover art, and metadata. I'll just grab a little. And then as aforementioned, distribution. It's huge. So these services will handle distribution automatically to the major directories, as well as to your own platforms, like your website, all of your social media channels. So at one-click publish, it propagates across all of your vast network and expanse of your business network. Systems like this are also great for analytics, tracking, and statistics for your show, including downloads, geographic data, and more. Just in the small time that the Conaverse podcast has been up, I think it has been listened to in about 30 countries. And I mean, that's a basic statistic in a system like this, but it's amazing to think when you marry the power of radio with the internet, the kind of reach that is available to you. 30 countries in about a month. Now, what I will call podcast mining. So we know the term mining, right? You're coal mining, data mining. You're going to go in and try to extract value by digging in and pulling out the proverbial diamonds in the rough. Not to say the podcasts overall are rough, but you know what I mean. Every episode will touch on many topics. All of these could be marketable in their own way to their own audiences. And it was created on your platform. You can use a transcription service. One I like is called otter.ai, AI standing for artificial intelligence. And services like this can quickly transcribe and timestamp your whole episode. I've seen an episode get transcribed, like a 45-minute to an hour episode, in like 15 minutes. And it's pretty on. And for the copy editing you might do to it, it's pretty minimal. And you can listen to the audio on top of the transcription right through the service, so you can make little changes here or there. We've seen some funny ones, when you're talking about names. I think there was one where it's thought the Conaverse podcast was the Carnivores podcast, which actually sounds kind of neat. But yeah, these are great tools. And what they allow you to do, because the legwork to transcribe an hour episode, it's probably going to take you 2 hours. It's a long time. So these allow you to have the mined podcast information without having to do all that transcription. But you can put these transcriptions then into a searchable database or note app. I really like Evernote for this. And at that point, all of your episode content is somewhere. So you can schedule these subjects to release on social media through products like Loomly or Hootsuite, and you could have them come out through the year, or be ready to pounce on trending subjects that you have talked about in the past. This is actually, there's a term for this. It's called newsjacking. It could be very impactful. So let's say you talked about some specific technology or a specific subject, like we have caregiving, English speaking in Laos or something. So let's say in 3 months, all of a sudden, with all these trending aspects we could see, Twitter trends, Google trends, Facebook trends, Google Analytics, a certain term just happens to be trending because maybe it's in the news and everyone's looking it up. Well, you can go into your little searchable database, and at any one time you could see, have I talked about this subject? And then maybe 3 episodes will come up where you talked about that. And you can pinpoint the point in the episode where you talked about it. And then you can release that content into the maelstrom, into the storm of everybody looking at it. And you will get a lot of follow-on activity for something that you did a while ago, but it's evergreen enough to be consumed at that time. And you have something to add to the discussion that will potentially be picked up and receptive at that time. Lastly, it's important to think about a podcast as source material. Yes, the downloads and analytics on the podcast itself are very important, but think of the content within as something that can be repurposed towards other multimedia. One podcast could contain numerous potential small video clips, social media graphics, blog ideas, transcripts, and really much more. I mean, so many things you could kind of innovate off of this source material that you created. Because let's be honest, even though we had that stat where 41% of Americans had listened to a podcast in the last month, 41%, like 116 million people. It's a lot of people, but there's only so much time in the day, right? And a lot of times people will get into a couple of podcasts, or if they get into too many, they're listening at 10 times speed. And are they really getting the full crux of what's discussed? So a lot of people will put out podcasts and maybe they don't get the downloads they're hoping. It's not necessarily because the content is bad, off, or not right. There's just only so much time. So what you can do is really repurpose the subjects within the different content, the different content types you have in there, and you can just really spread it out there on your channels to your network. One episode could potentially have, let's say, 10 quote graphics. Maybe there were great quotes you could pull out. Maybe it has 4 to 5 amazing 30 second to 1 minute video clips about a specific subject that can align with a specific audience. And so by thinking of the podcast in that holistic sense, you can really go so many ways with it. It doesn't feel like it was for naught. And so we've had many cases where we'll release an episode, and then over the next couple of weeks, we'll have accompanying 2 to 3 video clips. We'll have quote graphics. We'll have blogs come off of it. Potentially transcripts down the line. And while, let's say, just for discussion purposes, let's say an episode itself gets 100 downloads. We've seen some things with some targeting where then one part of the video clip of that podcast might get 300 views. In another place, it gets 200. The quote graphic might get a reach of, 50. And so in many ways, you're using that source material to spread your messages out there, to have content constantly flowing. And it didn't start with a blank canvas. It started with a couple of people over a Zoom speaking and kind of letting the magic of conversation take place, see where it goes, and then market it. And we all have that potential in business. I mean, we're in business for a reason, because we're good communicators, we're good at technology, we're good at something, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be a profitable enterprise. So if you can find the time, if you have someone who can speak well, host maybe, you could get a lot done with this medium. So the growth and opportunities for podcasts are absolutely there. I want to thank you and invite any questions.
Hey, Matt. So we have a couple of questions. So the first one is, are audio chat apps like Clubhouse denting a hole into podcast audiences because they're offered, two-way medium versus podcast, which is one way? This is from Amit.
Yeah, thanks, Amit. These applications are definitely the flavor of the moment. But to me, these almost feel like the podcast equivalent of like going to a concert, right? It's like a smaller, special group of people. Not special. I mean, in a concert, you got your ticket, right? But it's a group of people going in to hear a specific discussion in a moment. Or it's almost like being at a conference where you can go like conference room to hear the different subjects and topics. So I think it's definitely in play. I think it might be something that is a good complement. But for a lot of the reasons, I just love, I love what podcasts can do, not only for themselves, but hopefully it came across just for the follow-on content that can come from it. But this is a very good question.
So if someone were to get started on this, Matt, what's the first step? Like, what do they need to do? Buy a nice mic? Like, can you just give us some guidance?
Absolutely. What I would do first is really figure out what you want to talk about and what you're going to be able to talk about fairly easily. That's not going to take a ton of preparation. Maybe it's in your core competency, especially if you're in a specific business. Focus on that, because you want to be able to just schedule these and get going and let the conversations kind of take it where it goes. So absolutely, maybe use something like Zoom, because it's just easy to get off the ground. You don't have to have digital recorders and, all the equipment on the side and the boards and everything. So you could use Zoom and then get like a $20-$30 headset, or I know Akshay's gotten a real nice one. They can get expensive and nice, but $50, you could get a great microphone that sounds really professional grade.
All right. Anyways, I think that's pretty much it, Matt. Thank you so much for taking your time walking us through this. This is really helpful, and hopefully we can get some Uh, oh, wait, I think we got another question from Rachna. Should we include podcasting in our marketing strategy and how to keep it aligned
Mm.
with our aim, ultimate aim?
Mm. So I guess are we thinking of this overall or here? um, yeah, I think if you have the capacity, if you have anybody who has an interest in this, any editing capabilities, or is a good salesperson or speaker, I think it fits. It's a really important part of any marketing strategy. I think especially for those companies who like to focus on video, because if you're doing video, do audio because in my opinion, video takes a lot more efforts on both the recording and the production end. And as I noted earlier, it there's only so much time really we can devote to watching video, whereas audio it can always be around. So um, keeping it aligned is really a business discussion. How you do that, I think you have to have a mission for the show or the podcast that does align with the business in some regards, but I would be careful to expect that dreaded R word ROI from it necessarily, because it might give you a return on something, team building, networking, but uh, return on investment could come down the road. But I think if you tie it there immediately, it's probably going to let people down a little bit.
Okay, another one from Jason. If you transcribe your podcast, will the podcast distributors also include that with the publication if uploaded together? And then the second question is, does transcribing increase your ability to be found if someone is using search to find a podcast?
Great questions. So hopefully keep it up there so I can see both. But yeah, um, so if you transcribe your podcast and then you put either the transcription, it could go really long, or some summary of the transcription into the description field of the show, it will be picked up in the directories. Um, and transcribing absolutely increases your ability to be found if someone is using search to find your podcast, because you're opening up more uh, terms and possibility to be found. Um, we were actually talking to someone in the news industry the other day, and they felt that the transcriptions become so long that they almost lose like a user experience, and believed in maybe doing a transcription or doing a summary of the transcription. But it is a great point that's brought up here, because there is some level of not full SEO that we see with this, but there is some level of optimization you want to do with your show titles, sub descriptions, and descriptions in order to be picked up in the increasing use of all of these directories that we now discover our podcasts through, like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, um, Stitcher. There's so many now, but yeah, that it is an important part for the content mix.
All right, so the other one is if I go with Google Podcast, is it free?
Yes. So up until now, for the most part, podcasts have been liberated and free. There is some across all platforms. And the one thing I also want to say, the Apple directory provides the underlying directory for many other services too, including my favorite, Overcast. So it's really Apple, Google, and now Spotify is really in the mix. And Amazon's always there, but it's kind of the tech the tech battle between the bunch of them. But yeah, podcasts are for the most part free. Apple did just come out in the last month with subscriptions. Haven't really seen the uptake on that particularly, but they are trying to get in the mix with that. But I've never fully seen it take off. I think the minute you're paying for these, it becomes something different than a podcast. Not bad, but something different. So yeah, most of the time you see the word podcast, it's free.
Awesome. I think that's about it. We got quite a few questions. Thanks again for your time. Man, maybe we can follow up with more stats on how Conoverse is going or
Yeah,
more learnings as we pick up more of the transcriptions and push things a little bit more, right? So,
totally. Thank you. It's
cool.
been
Thanks
great.
again, everyone, for joining and have a good rest of your day.